My name is Elena Park, Senior Growth Strategist at Northline Goods, a direct-to-consumer home brand out of Chicago. I am the kind of marketer who measures feelings with numbers, and numbers with stories. I live inside GA4, but I also keep a black notebook where I sketch arcs for 30-second reels as if they were short films. I do attribution modeling before breakfast and write copy after midnight. Our stack is simple and sharp. HubSpot for CRM, Klaviyo for lifecycle, Meta and TikTok for paid, Looker Studio for reporting. In Q2, I pulled our blended CAC down to $17.40, lifted email revenue share to 32%, and pushed organic reach to a steady 2.1 million per week. None of that was luck. It was patience, clean hypotheses, ruthless A/B testing, and a voice that never talked down to our audience. I cared about the comments more than the CPM. When a customer wrote that one of our linen aprons smelled like her grandmother's kitchen, I built a whole series around memory and meals. I called it Home Truths, a docu-style thread of ordinary people cooking and talking. The pilot cut, shot on a borrowed Sony and graded in Premiere, sat in my drafts with UTM scaffolding ready, creator contracts templated, and a 6-week cadence mapped against product drops. The first hints of trouble were almost polite. My byline disappeared from the creative brief in Confluence, replaced by marketing leadership. In the all hands, the CEO thanked our leadership team for the social turnaround while nodding past me. A calendar invite appeared for an executive review of Q3 creative, and I was marked optional. The CMO asked me to share my Home Truths deck so she could synchronize the narrative, then requested the raw project files for backup. When I checked version history, my name had been stripped from the doc properties. On Slack, a director joked that I was our social girl, the way people say girl when they mean assistant. None of it was a blow, more like a collection of small cuts, tidy and deniable. I told myself to ignore the optics and trust the work. Metrics were neutral judges. The right story always found daylight. I kept my notebook close, exported clean dashboards, and dated everything. If there was a storm forming above me, I could not see it yet. I only felt the air change, a pressure across the chest that said, quietly, be ready. The executive review took place in a glass room that made every gesture visible and every voice sound careful. I arrived early with my notebook, the deck, and a list of risks taped to the inside cover. Vivian Rourke, our CMO, entered late with a latte and a smile that belonged in quarterly reports. Caleb Hart, the CEO, stood at the screen. He clicked to the title slide. Home. Truths. My punctuation. My still frame from the pilot I shot with a chef named Lourdes. A new font announced a new name, House Stories, as if renaming could launder authorship. Vivian spoke about a leadership vision for human-first content and walked through my outline in order. Persona tensions, arc structure, shot list, UTM schema, release cadence. The color grade matched my test cut. The music bed matched my notes. My name did not appear anywhere. When I raised a hand to add a consent checkpoint for creator edits, Vivian thanked me and said I would support execution on analytics. The room nodded. The decision had been made before I sat down. Afterward, the assets moved as if pushed by a tide. The Slack channel I had built, #home-truths, was archived and replaced by #house-stories-leadership. My access failed with a polite error. A request arrived from Ops to centralize drive ownership for consistency. Priya from IT sent a quiet screenshot showing 27 files now owned by marketing leadership. She asked if that was expected. I replied with gratitude and documented the change in my notebook with date, time, and who said what. I wrote the watch time and center from the pilot beside the note because numbers ground me when my name is not welcome in the room. They launched 2 weeks later. The first reel reached fast, not because the edit was clever, but because the people in it were real. Comments filled with memory. A press note credited Vivian with a pivot to authenticity. I felt 2 clean emotions at once. Pride that a story I had nursed found daylight. Fury that my fingerprints had been wiped from the glass. I kept the tone neutral in Slack as I posted the KPI readout. Completion rate to 50%, strong. Sentiment, rising. Suggested next test, long captions with burned-in captions for accessibility. Vivian reacted with a thumbs up and replied, Team effort. The win belonged to leadership, the labor belonged to me. I could work with that for a while, I could not pretend not to see it. Signals multiplied. My one-on-one shifted from craft to posture. Vivian praised my operational discipline and advised me to avoid over-identification with deliverables. HR moved my review up a month and added a new category called Leadership Presence. I earned needs improvement for not embracing direction with enough enthusiasm. When I asked for examples, none arrived. A pipeline improvement plan followed with 3 vague goals and misaligned deadlines. I signed, then built a new Looker Studio page labeled Narrative Impact with holdout geos and a simple control framework. If attribution was going to be a fight, I would bring diagrams, not heat. The ugliest turn came through a creator. Carmen, a nurse who filmed between shifts, sent me a message asking who to contact about payment. The new producer had issued a contract with perpetual license and no renewal fees. My original template promised 2 years with paid options to extend. The new doc removed approval rights for edits that change meaning. I read the language twice and felt the back of my neck go cold. I told her to insist on the original terms and to record the call if her state allowed it. I also told her, carefully, that I no longer owned the project and that all decisions sat with marketing leadership. She said she trusted only me. I told her to protect herself and forwarded a note to legal about creator relations. I archived the sent mail and wrote another line in the notebook. This is how culture fails. 1 clause at a time. Finance turned the knife. My quarterly bonus, earned on every published metric, was reduced by leadership discretion for strategic alignment. I printed the plan, highlighted the objective criteria, and filed it under the date. I scheduled a short consult with an employment attorney. We reviewed non-compete, non-solicit, and work product definitions. He was calm. He said my notebook belonged to me. He said my taste belonged to me. He told me to take nothing proprietary and to document everything I built on my own. Then he said the sentence that lifted pressure from my chest. You are the file. I closed the call and wrote it down. I underlined it twice. In the 3rd week, trade press praised our human stories and quoted Vivian. I walked to the lake and let the wind clear the executive tone from my ears. The city felt honest. I decided to stop begging for oxygen in a room that had drawn its curtains. I would keep the machine running, deliver with care, and leave clean. I drafted a resignation letter without accusations. I wrote about alignment and tempo. I thanked the team by name where it was safe. I saved the draft with a date 6 weeks out, tied to month-end close. At work, I kept pace. I posted weekly metrics and a voice that could pass for corporate. I booked studio time they could use. I made sure the audience would not feel the politics. A brand is a promise. Even when a room breaks faith with you, you keep the promise to the people who watch. The last week before my decision hardened brought one more lesson in how power edits truth into shape. Caleb stopped me in the hallway and congratulated me on my support for House Stories. He said leadership would handle author credit internally and that naming individual strategy owners created friction. I smiled and said I understood. I did not. I returned to my desk and wrote a single sentence on an otherwise blank page. Respect is not a sentiment. It is a system. Then I opened Looker, pulled the cohort curves for the last 14 days, and posted the report. I did my job as if the room deserved me. That is how you leave without becoming bitter. You finish your work at a standard that tells the truth about who you are, and when the last chart renders, you pick up your notebook and walk toward a door that you will open yourself. Clarity arrived like a neat ledger. What happened to me was not a misunderstanding, it was structure. Access trimmed, names removed, bonuses softened into opinions, creators pressed into perpetual licenses. If a system is built to forget you, arguing inside it is a poor strategy. So I moved from grievance to design. I booked one more call with counsel and asked for boundaries I could trust in daylight. My non-compete lasted 6 months, limited to direct competition in home goods within North America. The non-solicit ran 12 months for employees and contractors I had engaged. Confidential information meant non-public pricing, internal roadmaps, unreleased SKUs, private vendor terms. It did not include my craft, my framework, my taste, my questions, or the way I build consent into set. The notebook on my desk belonged to me. Do not take a single file, he said. Take the way you think. I wrote the sentence in block letters and felt my shoulders drop. I would leave clean. I would build clean. I would let results, not volume, be my witness. I incorporated the next morning. Open Story Goods, LLC, filed online with the state in 20 minutes. I requested an EIN, opened a business checking account at a credit union that still answered the phone, and set up a separate card so every receipt would reconcile without drama. I wrote a simple operating plan on one page: product, story engine, creator terms, contribution to a pantry on 47th, fulfillment cadence, service level to customers, service level to makers. I cut my personal burn by subletting my spare room and sold a rarely used lens. My runway spreadsheet reduced anxiety to math, savings balance, fixed costs, variable costs, projected revenue from the first drop, retainer income from a friend's coffee roaster for their newsletter, margin, burn, months left. If nothing went wrong, I had 5 months. If learning went well, I had 7. I taped the number above my monitor to irritate me into discipline. I chose a name that would keep me honest. Proof and Hearth. Proof because dough rises when time and warmth do their slow work, and because claims should be supported. Hearth because kitchens are where memory becomes food. I checked the trademark database for conflicts, bought the domain, and stripped a Shopify theme until it looked like a white table. I was not building a catalog. I was building a practice that pays people and tells the truth. The first product had to carry the thesis in its fibers. I wrote the brief for memory towels. Flour sack cotton printed with one sentence from a family recipe in the contributor's handwriting. Unit economics first, poetry second. Cut and sew in Pilsen quoted $9 landed at 200 units, print included. Compostable mailer, insert, label added $1.80. Payment processing would take about 4% at my volume. Shipping passed through with Shippo, zoned by weight. At $22 retail, there was enough room to pay contributors a fair fee. Send $1 per unit to the pantry, cover fixed costs, and keep the lights on. No wholesale, no discounts, pre-order windows only, production after funds cleared. I put the rules into a living memo and promised myself not to break them when I got tired. Content is the real product, so I built the engine like a newsroom. A Notion board with 4 pillars sat at the center. Hands, one motion filmed with attention, a chop, a knead, a knot of twine. Tools, one object with patina, and the person who refuses to replace it. Market days, a neighborhood errand that shows how a city breathes. The line, a single remembered sentence, and the story around it. I wrote a style guide as if briefing a documentary crew. Natural light preferred, 24 frames per second. 50 mm when intimacy is needed, 28 when the room needs to breathe. Room tone captured before questions begin. Color grade warm, but not sticky. Captions in full sentences. Alt text on every image. Consent workflow in writing. Ownership and usage in plain English. I reused nothing from Northline. I did not need to. The skeleton of home truths had been mine long before the deck switched titles. Contracts were the hinge. I designed the one page I always wished someone would hand me. Clear rates, payment in 30 days, 2-year license with a paid option to renew at half the original fee, approval rights for edits that change meaning, creator retains the right to repost and monetize their cut, usage window displayed publicly in the caption when appropriate, audit language limited to payment verification. At the bottom I put a line that said, "If anything here feels wrong, tell me and we will change it." Then I tested the entire system with a neighbor. Leon is a retired bus driver who bakes on Sundays. We filmed for an hour. No product in frame, only hands and voice. The first reel went up on a new account with 11 followers. 43 views, felt like a choir. The second reached 900 when his daughter shared it with her church. The third crossed 3,000 because regularity teaches an algorithm what you are. I set a cadence I could keep with my life. 1 reel each morning at 8:12 Central, because that is when my early cohort scrolls. 2 stories, 1 window into process, 1 check-in at night. 1 longer cut on Sundays at noon. A Q&A on Wednesdays that I actually answered. No paid media for 30 days, clean test only. Link in bio with UTM tags built by hand. A lightweight Looker Studio dashboard with needles that matter, reach, saves, replies, direct messages, conversion per session. Likes are loud, replies are true. Leaving required the same care as lighting a face. I wrote a full handover at Northline with cadence and contacts. I scheduled my resignation for the morning after month-end close. The letter contained 3 paragraphs, no accusations, only the fact that alignment is a finite substance and mine had been spent. I returned my laptop clean and left passwords where they belonged. I sent private thank yous to the people who had made hard days softer. I did not tweet. I did not hint. I did not turn my exit into content. When I got home, I built infrastructure the way some people mise en place. Klaviyo for email with a welcome flow around an essay called Why Proof. Stripe and PayPal connected. TaxJar toggled for Nexus. Policies written like a neighbor. Clear timeframes, clear returns. A FAQ that said, "We are small and we move carefully." I shot product photos by the window and resisted polish that would lie about scale. The last piece of planning was the part no dashboard can track. I wrote rules at the front of a fresh notebook. Credit people by name when they want it. If they want only a first name, honor that. Pay on time. If you err, admit it in public, and repair it without drama. Do not subtweet. Never build in reaction. Build in service. Do not compare your day 12 to someone else's year 7. Rest when your sentences go sharp for no reason. Protect tenderness like inventory. Then I closed the notebook, scheduled the launch post, and turned off my phone for 1 hour. Strategy is a promise to the future. I had written mine in ink. Launch morning behaved like a well-rehearsed service. I checked the storefront, ran a $1 test order, issued a refund, toggled, continue selling when out of stock, because pre-orders are agreements, not inventory. At 8:12 Central, the first reel announced memory towels with Leon's line in his handwriting. The caption invited one sentence from a family recipe and linked to a clean upload form. GA4's real time showed 7 people, then 19, then a small valley during the school run. At 8:32, the first order arrived with a note that said a kitchen smelled like childhood. By noon, 43 pre-orders sat in Shopify, average order value $24, because some added a pantry donation at checkout. I wrote the numbers by hand to slow my pulse, then opened Shippo and confirmed rates for the first 2 zones to keep the cost sheet honest. Keeping cadence became my metronome. Morning reel, midday comment sweep, late stories from the cut and sew shop, evening Q&A answered in full sentences. I built a Dubsado intake so contributors could upload scans without email chains. The shop in Pilsen called about white ink on unbleached cotton. A double pass would look bright but cost time, and 50 cents a unit. I chose a warmer single pass that respected the handwriting. Unit cost moved from $9 to $9.35. I cut my own margin and did not touch creator fees or the pantry dollar. There are lines I will not cross to make a spreadsheet flatter. A predictable crisis tested the system on day 3 when a teacher in Texas stitched our clip and traffic jumped. My image files were heavy and mobile load times hit 5 seconds. That is an eternity. I compressed assets, enabled lazy loading, removed an app that ran one hidden script, and rewrote the banner to tell the truth. We are small. If the site hiccups, refresh. We will keep our promises. DMs softened. Performance recovered. Human language did work. No speed test can complete. The first bit of earned media arrived as a short note in a local newsletter about small good things. Orders ticked up in neighborhoods where the writer's audience lived. A community radio show invited me to speak on Sunday. I brought Leon and said little. He talked about yeast and patience. The segment drove a slow, steady trickle. I prefer trickles to waves because trickles turn into habits. I used the collab feature on Instagram when it served both sides and refused the posture of constant calls to action. Links and stories waited until day 12 when we crossed the 10,000 follower threshold. I used the new link once a day at most and always to a story first, not a product page. Consent remained a ritual. Every participant signed a 1-page in plain language before the camera turned on. I walked each clause line by line. A young father asked me to blur a memorial on his forearm. I framed to his hands and approved only when he smiled at the cut. Another creator preferred only a first name because her manager disliked side work. I adjusted the caption template to allow for that and set a calendar nudge to check back in 6 months. These choices cost minutes and returned trust. comments filled with thanks, and emails arrived at midnight with lines that sounded like prayer. Operations found rhythm. On Monday, I carried the first trays from the shop, checked print density by a window, and rejected 9 out of 200 where the screen lifted. The lead apologized and offered a rush reprint. I brought cookies and thanked him, because apologies grow better work when they are met with respect, not heat. Fulfillment became a checklist. Sort, fold, insert a card with the contributors line, and a note on where the dollar goes. Print label, stack by route. USPS for light parcels. UPS for heavier bundles, where Zone 5 makes law of weight. I chose a 4x6 label for the counter scanner, because the clerk smiled when it read on the first try. Small frictions removed themselves under attention. An email from a law firm bearing Northline's name arrived on day 10. It alleged confusion in the marketplace and a substantially similar format and asked me to cease. I read it without letting adrenaline write my reply. I forwarded it to my counsel with a timeline and public links. He responded in measured language that I had used no marks, made no claims of affiliation, reused no material, and had published a pilot from my personal account prior to their premiere. He invited further correspondence to him only. I turned back to the schedule, filmed hands moving through flour, and delivered on time. I do not feed fires with oxygen. Growth bent from careful to confident, as cadence taught the system what we were. In the second week we crossed 5,000 followers, and what mattered more, replies outpaced comments. Non-follower reach climbed. Saves to likes inverted, a signal that the clips stored as memory rather than as noise. I summarized this in a field notes post that treated the audience as partners and included needles, not vanity. People saved the post more than any reel. Creators wrote that they were using our contract with other brands and getting fair renewals. I published the template as a free download with permission to adapt. The pantry link sat below it, and donations rose for a week and then held higher. Not everything ran clean. 3 trays arrived with a cure too cool, and the ink cracked. I could have shipped and hoped no one would notice. I wrote to every affected customer, explained the error, offered a reprint on a 1-week delay or a full refund. 70% chose the reprint. The rest took refunds and stayed. The shop adjusted cure temperature. I ate the extra shipping and slept with a quiet mind. Another afternoon, the algorithm favored sharp edits and faster hooks. I trimmed first frames and compressed openings without bending the ethics of the frame. I serve people, not a machine. I do not mistake a preference for a law. Week 4 forced a cash flow lesson. Pre-orders crossed 1,000, which meant production for the second run had to start before the first fully shipped. I secured a small line of credit with the credit union that had opened my account face-to-face and negotiated 2% for 10 days with the shop. I paid creators on 30-day terms by moving my schedule, not theirs. Founders who pay themselves nothing fail. Founders who pay themselves too much break trust. My salary covered rent, food, transit, and an emergency envelope. Each morning I wrote the bank balance on a whiteboard and aimed to move it up or keep it even. Survival is not newsworthy. It is honorable. A larger outlet called near the end of the month. The reporter wanted to write about a brand that paid on time and donated on purpose. I agreed if she named creators and the pantry. She did. The pantry director sent a photo of shelves stocked higher than usual. I printed it small and taped it beside the desk. Numbers widened into faces when I looked up from the chart. I kept posting, answering, shipping, and repairing small things before they cracked. Execution is faith practiced in public. I moved through each day with the calm of a person who chooses method over noise, and every time the cadence held, I felt the ground under my feet harden into a road. Spring pushed light into every window. Our slope bent from careful to confident. By mid-April, we sat at 80,000 followers, with comments that read like letters, not noise. What mattered hid beneath the header. Non-follower reach rose week over week. Saves outpaced likes 2-1. Replies beat public comments on 3 straight posts, a sign that people trusted the quiet channel. Completion to the end held at 14%, while Northlines hovered near 4%. I published a field notes called What We Measure, laid the graphs side by side, and wrote that a brand should be judged by the gravity of its work, not the volume. Screenshots of the dashboard traveled without me pushing them, and small founders wrote to say the template helped them speak to investors without apologizing for honesty. The spark I did not plan arrived from a creator. Jada filmed her aunt shaping conchas in a small kitchen and then posted a carousel about contract terms. Slide 1 showed flour on a hand. Slide 2 showed a red-lined clause from Northline's new agreement, swapping a 2-year license for a perpetual one. Slide 3 displayed my one page with a highlight under, "If anything here feels wrong, say so. We will fix it." She did not tag me. She told a story. It spread anyway. Overnight, 50,000 saves stacked up, then hundreds of stitches, with creators adding their red lines and their conditions. Trade Press called it the contract revolt. I placed our template on the site as a free download, no gate, permissive license to adapt. The pantry link sat right below it. Donations doubled for a week, then settled higher. We had not sought a fight. We had offered a tool and a tone. That was enough. 6 days later, Lourdes, the chef from my pilot, sent me a link to a fresh Northline reel of her own hands, repurposed with a caption that leaned her voice toward sentiment she never would have chosen. Her original license had expired the previous week. She had not agreed to extend. I explained the terrain and asked if she wanted to act. She said yes. My attorney prepared a platform takedown on her behalf, attaching the original agreement and dates. The reel vanished within hours with the usual notice about rights. A reporter wrote a precise, dry piece. Northline pulls video after rights challenge. My name was not in it. The comments did the rest. A machine cannot simulate contrition. It can only mark removals. A second letter from Northline's counsel arrived with sharper edges, alleging confusion in the marketplace and substantial similarity, as if a closed lens and a warm kitchen were proprietary. My attorney replied with a neat timeline. My personal pilot posted before their launch. My public field notes with timestamps. Creator payments cleared on 30-day terms. The absence of any mark or claim of affiliation. He closed by noting that future correspondence should come through him, and by inviting them to join an industry working group on creator standards if they wished to talk about policy rather than posture. The inbox went quiet. The platform did not. Sudden removals clip reach, and their account flattened. Ours kept humming. The public hinge came in a carpeted ballroom under hotel lights. Midwest Brand Story Summit placed me on a panel called Authenticity at Scale. Caleb and Vivian sat 2 chairs away, poised and smooth. The moderator asked how to protect trust. Vivian spoke about operationalizing empathy. Caleb quoted a lift in top-of-funnel awareness from Real People Content. My turn came. I held up my black notebook and read the line I wrote the day I filed my LLC. I can build something without stealing a thing. I put the notebook down and described consent as a system, not a sentiment. I handed the front row a stack of our one-page contracts and told a student who asked how to push back that she should start with terms she understands and keep a copy with dates. No names, no heat, just proof. The write-up the next morning used a phrase I am still learning to wear: the standard. I reminded myself that standards are only as good as the next invoice paid on time. 2 weeks later, Northline announced a leadership reorganization. Vivian's name was missing. An internal memo leaked and promised, named authorship in internal records, 2-year licenses with paid renewals, and an advisory council of creators. Caleb mailed me a printed note repeating those points. He did not apologize to me. He addressed the system. That was the only apology that mattered. I filed the letter beside my early notebook pages, not as a trophy, but as a receipt for pressure applied without spectacle. The Surpassed moment arrived on a quiet Wednesday when laundry clicked in the next room. I opened Insights to adjust a caption and saw our header settle at 241,000 followers. Northline sat at 239,000. I refreshed twice. The numbers held. More important, our accounts engaged in the last 30 days read 189,940 to their 182,000. I did not post a dunk. I sent 3 bonus payments labeled "Because You Held the Line" to Leon, Carmen, and Lourdes, then wired the pantry an extra check for the walk-in cooler they had been saving toward. I wrote a field notes titled Enough, where I argued that account is only noble when it reflects consent, credit, and checks that clear. People saved that post more than any reel that month. Momentum widened into consequence. A national home magazine asked to feature memory towels in a piece about gifts that carry a family forward. I refused a glossy set and sent Leon at his table. They ran it as is. A kitchen tools company proposed licensing the line for an anniversary series with clear front-loaded payments to contributors. We drafted terms in public, and other brands copied them. A culinary school paid Carmen to guest lecture beside me on narrative ethics. She stood straighter than the first time, and said that being treated as an author changed the way she says yes. In our DMs, junior social managers from Northline wrote simple hearts under our posts. I responded with one back and kept walking. Winning is not the point. The point is the room we built. That night I slept through until morning without listening for a fight. I woke up to sunlight on the desk, brewed coffee, and opened a fresh page for the next series in the line. The climax did not feel like a trumpet. It felt like good posture. The numbers honored the work honored the people fed the pantry stocked shelves. I closed insights and wrote 3 words in the margin before I started the day. Keep it steady. I keep the first black notebook above my desk like a ledger of choices. On one page, a single sentence stands alone. I can build something without stealing a thing. Around it, the months have filled in. Proof and Hearth became a cadence more than a company. Clips went live at 8:12. Invoices cleared on 30 days. The pantry received checks at quarter end. Creators renewed their licenses because renewals felt respectful instead of automatic. When a post landed soft, I did what craft demands. I asked why, moved a frame, sharpened a first line, checked captions for clarity, and let results speak. The work was never a roar. It was a hum I could live inside without flinching. I learned to track 2 kinds of numbers with equal discipline. On one dashboard, the platform graphs moved like weather: reach, completion, non-follower engagement, replies that prove someone trusted the quiet channel. On the other dashboard, the real promises lived. On-time payments, renewal acceptance, pantry totals, consent confirmations signed without hesitation. Emails that said a single printed line made a kitchen feel like home again. The second dashboard began to govern the first. When a decision would lift reach but bend a principle, I let it pass. There is power in limits you do not apologize for. People recognize a boundary that protects them, and they reward it with patience. Questions about Northline still arrived, lighter now, curious rather than hungry for conflict. I answered with facts and no heat. They reorganized, they credited authors internally, they moved to 2-year licenses with paid renewals, they set up a council and paid back overages. I kept the letter Caleb wrote in a file with early pages from my notebook. Not a trophy, a receipt that pressure can turn policy. When a young producer from their team messaged to say she had modeled a kinder brief on our one page, I felt something unclench that had lived tight for a year. Not forgiveness. Recognition that dignity can travel across rooms if you write it down and keep offering it without demanding applause. The audience taught me the last lesson. We built a comment section that sounded like a table. People posted their lines without asking for a spotlight. They thanked one another for recipes, not for me. When I mispriced a shipping rule and overcharged 12 orders by $2, 3 people noticed and wrote kindly. I refunded everyone and wrote a field notes titled, "We missed." The post performed like a confession, yet the analytics I cared about did not dip. Cohorts held. Replies were generous. The pantry received the same transfer as always. I slept better than the nights when numbers spiked for spectacle. Trust is a slope you earn, not an event you stage. Priya visited the studio on a Saturday with coffee, and the surprise relief that comes when a friend crosses out of a story that hurt. She told me her new team credits authors in code reviews by default, and logs the decision in a changelog anyone can read. She said the rule came from a short internal memo about attribution she had written after reading our field notes. The memo cited no names, only systems. We laughed at how plain words can disarm the machinery of erasure more effectively than outrage. She left with a towel that read "Taste before you serve" and a bag of flour for her own experiments. The next week, a culinary school paid Carmen to co-teach a class on narrative ethics. She held a stack of contracts like a teacher holds a book, and explained to students that approval rights are not a luxury, they are a guardrail. Watching her, I understood that victory does not sit in a follower count, it sits in posture. If there is a moral, it is practical. Credit is infrastructure, not kindness. Contracts are relationships written down, not shields for power. Strategy protects tenderness from systems that prefer speed. Numbers will defend you if you learn their language and refuse to twist it. When a room erases your name, document with calm, leave clean, and build where consent can breathe. Pay people on time. Ask permission in writing. Tell the truth when you blunder and fix it without theater. The market will not always reward you fast, but you will keep your sleep, your team, and your face in the mirror. That is wealth. Sometimes I walk past the hotel where the panel happened and remember the stage, the soft lights, the stack of one-pages sliding from my hand to the edge of the world. I did not win that day. I simply offered a method you could pick up and carry home. The method is the point. A brand can be a small machine for fairness if you take the time to tune it. Make room for names. Set clocks to honesty. Build cushions into cash so you do not pay creators late. Teach your audience how to read the work with you. Refuse to chase heat. Heat burns. Warmth sustains. I still film hands at 24 frames per second. I still sit with the pantry director each quarter and reconcile numbers with shelves. I still answer DMs at night with care because someone wrote the single line that keeps their kitchen together. Somewhere, a junior manager will hide a credit in a deck today. Somewhere else, a young strategist will underline a sentence in a notebook and decide not to accept it. To her, I offer my ledger. I did not raise my voice, I raised a standard. It was enough. It will be enough again if you keep respect at the center and build like you mean to be here in 10 years. The light on my table moves across the wood, the 812 post loads, and the room hums. I return to the first page, touch the sentence with my thumb, and go back to work.